Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting, March 27, 2012. I'd like to thank the Garden Club for the flowers they always provide for our meetings. And the roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Here.
Mayor Ruane.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
And Councilmember O'Connell will be late or excused with notice. So thank you. And Mr. Rico, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, we have a couple of announcements. The first one is the annual pancake breakfast and Easter egg hunt will be held March 31st, this Saturday, from 9 to 11 at San Bruno City Park. And I've already talked to Randy Schwartz. If in fact the weather is too inclement, we have made separate arrangements. So we will still have it. The Easter egg hunt begins promptly at 11 a.m. indoors or outdoors, so we'll have to wait and see. And then the city manager would like to make some comments under announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The announcement is that the city will begin construction of the waterline improvements located at both ends of Plymouth Street, where it intersects Claremont on each end. This is part of the infrastructure rebuild in the Crestmore neighborhood that was damaged by the September 2010 explosion and fire. That work will begin on Monday, April 2nd, and the project will take approximately 2 months to complete. It will be located, as I indicated, in the intersection of Plymouth and Claremont at both ends of Plymouth, as well as in the two intersections of Claremont and Sneath Lane. So motorists can expect a little bit of disruption. This will be the first of actually a few projects that it will take in order to complete the infrastructure rebuild in that neighborhood.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 4, presentations. We have one presentation this evening, and that's received a presentation from Robert Rico. He's the representative, our representative to the San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Control District on recommended actions to prevent spread of mosquitoes. Mr. Rico.
Honorable Mayor, City Council members, City staff, and San Bruno residents. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to update you as your trustee to the San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Control District on how San Bruno residents can help the mosquito district. 1, residents can help by checking their yards and dumping containers that have filled with water after the rains, and this includes your rain gutters if there's sagging spots. 2, if water collects under your home, either install a sump pump or if required, repair the existing sump pump. We're finding a lot of standing water under some of the older homes. Number 3, call the district at 344-8592 if you are being bitten by mosquitoes. Hopefully you're not. And 4, remember that dead tree squirrels are also an important indicator of the possibility of West Nile virus. Call the state hotline, which is 1-877 West Nile Virus Bird, WNBBIRD, for dead tree squirrels as well as dead birds. The Mosquito District controls mosquitoes through a planned program of integrated vector management based on science and a firm understanding of the biology of the mosquito. This program includes extensive monitoring to target control to the presence of mosquito larvae in standing water. The district uses biorational materials for the control of mosquitoes in standing water. These include bacteria and growth regulators that are specific to mosquitoes and do not harm wildlife or fish. Mills Field does not currently contain sufficient standing water or immature mosquitoes, but it is being inspected weekly by the mosquito control technicians. During winter months, mosquito larvae are primarily found in water that collects throughout the property in low areas. Helicopter treatment of Mills Field for Thule mosquitoes will begin in July. The district will inform the city and other agencies when the dates for the helicopter applications have been established. During the summer, mosquitoes develop in the water at the base of these thick stands of cattails in Mills Field. The area must be treated by helicopter because it's the only way to get the material through the vegetation and into the water. The material applied is granular, similar to sand, which contains a biological pesticide, which is a bacteria that is specific to mosquitoes. Helicopter applications are made monthly from July through October. Currently, we're in tick season, which runs January through April. Excuse me. People may encounter ticks when hiking in natural areas through brush. The district collects and tests ticks from hiking trails throughout the county. The Lyme disease bacteria has been found in ticks in most of the parks in San Mateo County. About 3% of the ticks are infected. Residents can call the district at 344-8592 for information about ticks and Lyme disease. People can protect themselves from Lyme disease infected ticks by the following measures. 1, wear long pants, boots, and socks when hiking. 2, check yourself for ticks and remove them promptly if you find them on you. 3, 20% DEET can be applied to the skin to repel ticks. And 4, Promethium sprayed on clothes will kill any ticks that hitchhike on clothing, and this is available in stores that sell sports and camping equipment. I provided City Clerk Carol Bonner and a couple of your departments copies of our flyer for reporting dead birds for posting. I'll leave a couple more in the back. And for the district, I want to thank the City of San Bruno and your various departments who continue to support our request for fighting the bite. I'll be happy to try and answer any questions, or I will provide your questions to the district and return with answers should you have any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Rico? Thank you very much. And Robert, once again, thank you very much for all the time you put in. I know it's a big effort, but it's well worth it for all the citizens of San Bruno. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Item 5, review of the agenda. I would like to move item 11, which is the annual report of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, to right after item number 8, which is public hearings. Any other agenda items? Okay. Approval of the minutes of the special closed session council meeting of March 9, 2012, and the regular council meeting of March 13, 2012. I understand we have some minor corrections or additions. City Clerk?
There's some minor changes to the last page of the regular council meeting that have to do with the documentary that's going to be done, and I left a copy on the dais for each of you, highlighted in yellow, as well as copies for the public on the table.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, I realize that our minutes are usually summarized and it gives a very accurate picture of what we've reviewed, but I have to compliment the city clerk for the current minutes, because I know there was a lot of testimony with the rates, discussion of the rates, and reading through it, and I got a very good, clear indication of what all of us were asking, and so thank you for taking at least that meeting and applying some detail to them.
Thank you. I'd like a motion to approve the minutes as submitted by the city clerk.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 7, consent calendar. All items are considered routine or implemented earlier council action and may be acted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested by a council member, citizen, or staff. Any discussion on the consent calendar or action?
If there's not, move to approve the consent calendar?
Second.
Motion second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item number 8, public hearings. Notices have been published, posted, and mailed. We do not have any public hearings this evening. We're going to hear item number 11 at this time, which is the annual report of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I'll wait for the slide presentation. On behalf of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, I'm the current chair, Randy Brace. With us, Vice Chair Walter Bird. We have 2 other members at large, George Yang, Carl Nicolari, and David Nigel is here with us as well. Joe Sumut, and we have a vacant position from the Traffic Safety and Parking Committee. And Jim Brown is, of course, our City Council representative. And all the members at large are unanimous in the appreciation of the support of the city staff, Laura and Jim. They do a fantastic job, and we really appreciate them a lot. So, in our outreach and education, we continue with supporting Bike to Work Day, and this year was 7 years running that we've participated, and you can see David Nigel, picture of David at an Energizer station. 8th year running, having a table at the Posey Parade where we hand out flyers and posters and little kits. We're also supported by the commute.org. They give us a lot of swag that we get to hand out, and we appreciate that. Also, this year we had a table at the farmers market in San Bruno, and we again passed out swag and talked to folks. Headed up by our past chair, George Yang, we decided to try to organize a walking school bus. And we brought this to the PTA at John Muir's school, and coincidentally enough, Principal Fran Dunleavy had a similar idea. And after a presentation, they, with their PTA, they headed up a walk to school day for the kids at John Muir School. We have completed our 3rd public service announcement, and I'd like you to take a look at it.
Have you ever seen a Share the Road sign? What does Share the Road mean to you?
When I pass a cyclist, I leave plenty of room.
I let the cyclist have his turn at the stop sign.
I expect the unexpected. I pay attention to trucks.
I give trucks lots of room.
What does Share the Road mean to you?
I obey the same laws as traffic.
I stop at stop signs.
I try to give hand signals to show my intent.
I ride to the right with the flow of traffic.
How can you help make the road safer?
Wear a helmet. Ride to the right and look ahead.
Don't tailgate.
Give cyclists time to cross intersections.
Try to be visible.
I drive defensively.
I wear protective clothing when I ride.
I'm always looking.
Share the road.
I'd like to thank Miriam Shalit and the people at San Bruno Cable for their great work on that. As you can see, it turned out really nice. So that's our 3rd one we've completed. Future planning. We have, city staff has solicited input from the committee, and we were able to provide some input that was, and comments that were integrated in the final plans of the community-based transportation plan, as well as working with the San Mateo County-wide bicycle master plan. So our goals for this year is to hopefully create another public service announcement, host a bicycle safety workshop, assist in development of a pedestrian and bicycle master plan, and assist with implementation of community-based transportation plan. And this should be one of our goals too, actually, because we have vacancies and we really need to fill them. And so flyers have been printed up, and I guess they're being circulated. And hopeful applicants just need to want to promote pedestrian and bicycle safety awareness and access, not just within the city of San Bruno, but also countywide. And they must have a passion for serving community. They need to know that they don't have to be an avid bicyclist to participate. We're especially looking for walking advocates with an eye towards ADA access. And that's my presentation. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'd gladly answer.
I want to thank you and the members of the committee. I know you've been a little short-handed lately, but I know the city clerk has been very aggressive to get the word out. in focus and at YouTube and Walmart.com, and we had a couple of interviewees tonight, and so we hope to fill that vacancy pretty quick.
Great,
So,
thank you for that.
once again, thank you. This city runs on a lot of volunteerism, and you make a big part. This is great. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Item number 9 is public comment on items not on the agenda. Let me see here. It's council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Would anyone like to address the council under public comment?
Here's one. Perry Peterson, 190 Scenic Court. Good evening, council. Appreciate a few moments. I have some input for you on the water and wastewater rate subject. I watched your council meeting on that, and I think the first thing I should say is I think you've done two very good things. One, I think it takes a lot of courage to advocate a water and wastewater rate increase. Typically, government bodies shy away from this, but you've recognized that it's needed for capital improvement projects because these assets are wasting away. Secondly, though, I think you've done a good job in setting a rate plan that is so high that even if it's reduced somewhat, you still have quite a bit of funds to do something. In order to make these comments, I did some research. I watched the council meeting, made my own transcript, went to the library and then to City Hall to get the financial report on which your rate increase is based. But I ran into a problem. There is no financial report. Although the staff report talked about working with a consultant on the financial background, there was not even a draft report available. Staff has told me that when they see a report, they'll let me know. But I think this is something that it would probably be a good idea to extend the beginning or the end of the public hearing out until background financial reports on this rate increase are available. And on the other hand, I think you're headed in the right direction. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mayor, City Council members, and San Bruno residents. My name is Hannah Ingersoll.
And I am Plenty Caballero.
We are both part of Cappuccino High School's Abolitionist Club, which works towards ending modern-day slavery. This Thursday evening, March 29th, we are hosting a free event in our cafeteria from 7 to 8 p.m., and we are extending this invitation to the community. Many of you have probably heard of the Coney movement, but if not, let me inform you. On March 5th, the Invisible Children organization, a San Diego-based nonprofit, debuted a 30-minute documentary about the war going on in Central Africa, the child soldiers that are forced to fight in combat, and the warlord Joseph Kony, who has prolonged this war for the past 26 years. The goal for the campaign is to make Kony a household name, make him famous. He is one of the world's most dangerous criminals, but unfortunately, very few people know who he is. In October, Obama sent 100 military advisors into Central Africa to help with the overthrow of Kony. At any time, the U.S. government can decide to withdraw these troops. That's why Invisible Children aims to put pressure on the U.S. government to continue their support. They hope to do this through the support of celebrities and politicians. As of right now, the video has been viewed over 100 million times. It has become an extremely hot topic on Twitter and many social networking sites. Although there has been strong criticism regarding the matter, the Cappuccino Abolitionist Club is still in full support of the Kony 2012 movement and still thoroughly believes in the campaign slogan, "Stop at Nothing." Come this Thursday evening to Cappuccino High School's cafeteria from 7 to 8 p.m. Watch the 30-minute documentary and hear from a Ugandan representative speak on the matter. This event is open to the public, free, and does have limited seating. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's this Thursday at 7 o'clock at Cappuccino.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else in public comment? Okay. Item number 10, conduct of business. First item is to receive a report and provide direction to staff regarding alternatives for memory lane. The protocol for this item, because there was a lot of discussion at the previous meeting, we're going to hear from Mark Zaffarano, our city attorney, first. And then we're going to see if the council has any questions or comments from Mark at this time. Then we will hear, based on these comment cards, if you want to speak on this, please fill one out. We'll allow you 3 minutes to speak on this item. And then the council will hopefully give some direction to staff. So, Mark, staff report, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Tonight we're going to be discussing alternatives for memory lane, and so that's why you'll see that heading on each and every one of the PowerPoint slides. We're going to go through tonight fairly briefly and quickly. So first off, to summarize what's already happened, about a month ago at your City Council meeting, you received a staff report and took a lot of public comment from members of the public, some of whom are here today and some of whom couldn't make it, probably due to the inclement weather. So we're sorry about that. But you heard a staff report in which there were survey results of over 135, I think, residents, most of whom indicated they wanted to keep the lane open, some of whom indicated they want it closed. You also heard the public express concerns about, frankly, both of those alternatives. And so the City Council directed us to come up with some alternatives and options for you all to consider. So staff had 4 goals when we embarked on this process. And the first goal was to consider each and every comment that every member of the public made, not only at the meeting last time, but also in all of the surveys, emails, and other information that the city got. And we, in fact, did that. Laura Russell, who's sitting here to my right and is thankfully helping me operate a PowerPoint presentation, compiled all of that information, and we looked through it carefully. The council's direction at the last meeting was to find some potential solutions to address all of these concerns. So what staff did is they suggested some alternatives that have been used successfully elsewhere. That was one of our goals. We didn't want to suggest alternatives that hadn't worked or that we didn't think were going to work. So tonight, when we go through those alternatives, it's important to keep in mind that, of course, the council could select one of those alternatives, some of them, all of them, none of them, either in stages or simultaneously. So you'll see when we get to the alternatives that there's a number of options for you that you could do either together, in conjunction, or by themselves. Staff also obtained some preliminary cost estimates for all of the alternatives, and you'll see some of those on the upcoming slides. Unfortunately, there's no funding for the memory lane improvements, if there are to be any, in this year's budget. However, there is a grant opportunity available to the city from the Safe Routes to School, and the city is applying for that grant, and if awarded, it may cover some of the improvements for calendar year 2013. So if you have some questions about that, Clara Fabry is here and available to answer those questions. But I wanted to be sure to mention that to you, and especially because Councilmember O'Connell, who can't be here tonight, is the person who indicated that that was of interest to her. So what I thought we should do before we start is just take a look at some photographs and examine what memory lane looks like. So what Laura did this morning before it started pouring rain was took some pictures of different segments of the lane, and primarily these are here to show you the variation in configuration and the logistics involved in trying to figure out a solution to the problems that the residents indicated. So this is Elm to Poplar looking east. So now we're looking toward the bay, and this is the westerly-most section of the lane. And as you can see in this section, there are houses whose side walls are right on the property line. You'll also see in the bottom picture there a red curb and no ADA curb ramp, so that was one of the things that was addressed by some of the residents. Also notice that the red curb there is actually fairly short, and that certainly appears to cover the crosswalk there in the picture, but also is short enough to provide some on-street parking for the adjacent residents. So this is the same segment looking east a little bit closer, and you can see here on the top picture on the right-hand side that there's those windows that are directly onto the lane over there. On the bottom picture, you'll see that the front yard of the house on the left has some shrubs and a very low fence there. So this is the next section, and you'll see that this is different. This section of the lane, this is looking west now, has fences on the property line as opposed to the sides of houses. And those fences are fairly low. Laura reminded me that she's not very tall, and yet she was able to take these photographs standing up simply with her camera. So these are low fences of different configurations that do provide some buffer between the house and the property line, unlike in the earlier segment. Then if we take a look, this is sort of walking up the lane, looking west, you'll see the yield sign up there at the top of both of the photographs. But here what's happened is we've walked past the fences now, and the fences have transitioned to a sort of high cinder block wall there on the left. And then also on the left, you'll notice that there's a gate over there that provides access for that resident into memory lane. And you'll notice that there's doorways also on the property on the other side. So we also wanted to take a look as to what this looked like looking east. And again, this is a block of Poplar to Linden, characterized by fences only on the property line. And you'll see on the bottom picture how low the fences are, just a couple, 3 feet. And you'll also see, most importantly, on the top picture there, on the left one, that there's windows that are really right looking out over that fence there on the right, looking right out over the lane and very, very close to it. So this is an example of Poplar to Linden looking west, and you'll see that this is the kind of ADA access that was built into one of the other blocks. Also note on the right-hand side of the picture there on the left that there is some shrubbery there in the front yard of that property, not a wall, not a fence, but some shrubs. So when we looked at that in all of these pictures, we tried to figure out, well, if we had to put up some sort of fence or barrier, how would we do that? That was one of the things we were looking at in taking all these pictures. So then just a couple more. We looked at some of the pictures of Memory Lane through Grace Honda, and this is looking east. You'll notice that it's characterized by a single bollard in the middle of the lane over there, and actually in both sections there in the top left-hand picture. And then you'll also see a fence, a cyclone fence with slats. This is the section of the lane looking west now, and one of the features here you'll see is not only is there some trees and shrubbery, but also a relative lack of separation between the lane and the vehicles that are parked on each side. So with all this in mind, we tried to come up for you with some alternatives, and the first slide shows you some of the alternatives that we considered recommending for physical improvements. And the first one is to provide some fencing by the city to provide a buffer between the private and public spaces. And you'll see on all of those photographs, if you remember, that there's a blur between the public and the private space, especially with respect to those houses that are right up on the property line, but also with the houses that have fences and then the house behind it. So the second physical improvement that could be made is the city could allow residents to themselves build taller fences. And right now they would need a variance to do that, but the city could find a way to allow those taller fences to come in to provide some additional privacy for residents whose fences are right on the property line. Why did we recommend these? For a couple of reasons. First of all, we think that a fence of some sort would reduce the incidence of vandalism. It would make it harder, deter people from throwing objects over the fence, which was one of the things that was emphasized by some of the residents. It would increase the separation between the public and the private space. And depending on how the fence is constructed, if it were, for example, a city fence, we could find a way to screen it with foliage, and it would reduce or deter the incidence of graffiti. One of the other suggestions that staff had was to place several bollards at the openings of each end of the lane. And the reason for that would be it would prevent vehicular access. I think some of the residents indicated that was a problem. It would, if not prevent, it would deter scooters and two-wheeled motorized vehicles. I think one of the residents indicated that was an issue. So that was one of the things that staff came up with. Fourthly, there are some ADA improvements that obviously need to be done at that one section of the lane in terms of a curb cut. There's been some discussion about red curb and how far should those go. On the one hand, you want to be sure there's enough sight distance, both for pedestrians coming out of the lane into the street and also for cars driving down the street so they can see the pedestrians. On the other hand, you don't want to red curb in front of people's houses so they can't park their cars there. And then finally, staff is recommending the possibility of relocating the Grace Honda segment if that's necessary. And by the way, following up on the last meeting, staff did send a letter to the Grace Honda folks and asked at your direction for information regarding the proposed building or requirements that Honda would be imposing on them, and we did ask them to provide that information to staff, and they have not done so as of tonight. So those are some physical improvements that could be made. We now have some improvements or options for what we refer to as an additional official presence. And first and on the top of that list is the possibility of installing some cameras. This is something that the police department and staff has worked very closely in analyzing. The police department believes that cameras would both deter crime and unruly behavior. It would certainly assist Parkside with any disciplinary problems they might be having, and it would provide additional security for all of the neighbors along the lane, and frankly, for everybody in the neighborhood. One of the other alternatives is that staff considered and is recommending is to reassign the school resource officer, SRO. That person could be deployed, as indicated in the staff reports, to memory lane at particular times of the day when there's a lot of kids using it, primarily in the afternoon. And again, we think that an adult official presence would deter a lot of the negative behavior that the residents have told us about, and would certainly provide not only a deterrent to those activities, but also if somebody is engaging in bad behavior, there'd be somebody there to catch them and stop them before it became a problem. The third thing that staff recommended is to continue working with Parkside on some solutions, and I'm pleased to report that the police department and the school have in fact gotten together to discuss some of the ideas, one of which was an increased penalty for students who are found to have engaged in negative behavior on memory lane, and the school is indicated they're in support of that. So the staff would certainly like to continue those efforts and those discussions so that we can make sure that we're partnering with them to address any of the problems. Last but not least, we had a fair bit of discussion about adopting a volunteer program for the city as a whole, not just for memory lane, primarily because it's not really cost effective just to do it for one place in the city. The police chief has indicated this type of program has been very effective in neighboring cities, including Millbrae. It's definitely something to consider. However, there is an expense associated with it, and we talked a little bit about that in the staff report. So those are some of the alternatives that we considered and recommended, both physical and having a more surveillance and an official presence. A couple of things we also considered at your request was whether we should recommend formally vacating the lane. And as you probably know, that's a legal process that involves both the Planning Commission and City Council, and they have to make a finding that the lane is unnecessary for present or future public use. And given the testimony that we heard last time and the survey results, it seems it would be difficult for staff to make that recommendation that the lane is either not being used now or is not going to be used in the future, when we've had a fair bit of direct evidence that it is in fact being used now and in fact will be used in the future. Vacation would probably require an environmental review, but if you're willing or interested to consider it, we also have to reserve easements that run under the property. So that's an important consideration for a vacation. The other alternative that we looked at was either a temporary or permanent closure. And I think as the staff report pointed out with a fair bit of data, staff believes that the crime and unruly activity now is generally low, and certainly low compared to other similar areas where school lets out. Closure would impact those who use the lane frequently, and it's actually unclear how we would accomplish closure in a way that everybody would find acceptable. You can see from some of those photographs, it's sort of difficult to imagine how you'd put up a big gate or cyclone fence across the front of the lane when there isn't necessarily a solid structure that goes all the way out in some of those properties. So it certainly raises some challenges as to how that would be done. Another issue that staff considered was the risk that if we did close the lane, it would merely displace whatever negative behavior is occurring on the lane into the neighborhood elsewhere. So that concludes my staff report. Be happy to answer any questions. And then once we're done with that, the mayor indicated that we could obtain any additional input from the public. And then we'd love to hear from you, the city council, and provide us with some direction about how to proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions of the city attorney?
Mr. Mayor? Mark, regarding the vacating, you say that it's a legal process. Why is there a legal process? Is
that process is specified in the Streets and Highways Code under state law.
Streets and Highways Code?
That's correct.
Okay. So how does a pedestrian walkway pertain to Streets and Highways Code?
So that's a good question. Public access ways of all kinds are covered in the Streets and Highways Code. It's not just streets and highways. So if a public entity wishes to take a public way and place it out of public service, it has to conduct a process and determine that the way is either not being used now or won't be used in the future for public use, among various other findings, but that's the most important one. And so a street vacation is a process that both the Planning Commission and the City Council have to have a hearing on, and they have to make that finding in those decisions. Once it's vacated, then the way would revert to the adjacent property owners. That's the essence of that legal process.
With an easement?
That's right. The city would retain an easement for utilities under it. That's correct.
Okay. With that said, when you talk about a buffer, specifically for those homes where zero lot line is the term, where the walls are right on the property line, what would the buffer be? I mean, would you build the fence right up against the house, or would you have some airspace?
So staff considered a number of possibilities, and as you can see from the configuration of properties, it's actually not that simple to figure out what a buffer would be. In some places, it looks like you could build a fence maybe a couple of feet in from the property line that would be a city fence that would then screen and provide a sort of green screen essentially for the view out of the windows that are looking right out onto the lane. In other places, it might be possible to install, for example, and by the way, this is all with irrigation. We're not proposing that we plant something and then let it die. One of the other possibilities would be to plant some sort of planter boxes along there and then allow foliage to grow up onto a trellis or fence. That would be something else that might be considered. But we acknowledge that it does present a bit of a challenge. In the areas where there's just fences on the property line, that's a little bit easier because, as I said, you can have a situation where residents could increase the size of the height of their fence, or the city could somehow participate in that process. They already have a buffer.
Thank you.
Michael?
Chair, thank you. I really wouldn't consider a fence in front of another fence a buffer. It still seems that the proximity is going to be an issue, and it's something that the residents that live right next to there brought up as an issue before, that we can beautify it, but does it really solve the problem? And I think having a large volume of people moving through that area that close to those houses is probably not going to be alleviated by adding a fence or even beautifying it, putting plants up. I also had a question about the costs that are proposed in here. It states the linear foot or cost per foot of the fencing, and the fact that there would be a $30,000 additional increase in there, but there's no the total dollar figure. So I guess I could have measured it and come up with a number. There's nothing in here that talks about annual maintenance. If the stuff is damaged or vandalized by the same people we're trying to keep from causing trouble now, what's it going to cost to replace this stuff on an ongoing basis? That really wasn't addressed in there.
So just on that last point, you're right, we didn't address the ongoing cost of maintenance. We did look at trying to come up with a total cost for a fence, and the problem we had was we didn't know exactly where the fence would be. You know, if you take 200 feet, which is each segment of the lane, and multiply it by 4, and you say you're going to put 800 linear feet of fence down both sides of each of the blocks of the lane, that's a fairly large number, and it's not necessarily a project that would solve or be effective at solving all of the problems. It seemed when we looked at the individual houses and configuration on the lane that some sort of fence or screening might be appropriate for some of the houses, but not all of them. So that's the reason why we didn't include a total number. But we hope that what we did include was helpful enough so you could get a ballpark of what we'd be talking about if we did 50 feet or 100 feet, for example.
Okay. And then relating to the grant that you discussed, what is the total amount that we could hope to get from a grant?
So I'd like Clara Fabry to address that. She's been working with her staff diligently on getting that accomplished, and she has some details for you on that.
Good evening. Would depend on what your decision will be tonight. The grant application is due this upcoming Friday, and depending what will be your decision tonight, all of those items will be included in our grant application. This grant due date for this Friday is for a state-funded infrastructure type of grant using state fund, and is more all of the safety improvements certainly would be eligible. The fence is questionable, still under discussion with the grant management. Probably if that would be your decision tonight, still would be included in our grant application, and all of us will see the final decision on if that they will accept or say eligible item or not. But all of the remaining of the infrastructure type of improvement would be eligible, and also up to 10% non-infrastructure type of expenses like enforcement and education. In the same time, another grant opportunities available for non-infrastructure type of improvement like education and enforcement. This is a region-wide safe route to school program, and is available about $2 million for 2 years for this program, and can be the application can be filled out anytime. The school can apply for this grant directly also, or jointly with the city. The city can, with the school, both of those agencies can apply for this available grant.
And so in the original grant, infrastructure would mean the ramps at the sidewalk.
The ADA ramps, warning signs for pedestrian, maybe including some flashlights, also the video cameras installed alongside those type, plus the fence, depending what would be your recommendation on the lighting, if additional lighting will be necessary. All of those items then could be included in the grant application.
Okay, thank you. And a few more questions. In the presentation, you mentioned that some of these solutions had been used elsewhere, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on where else we could see examples of this being used, and what the situation was, and how it was alleviated by these solutions.
That's an excellent question. I'd like Chief Telford to address that. He has some experience with the cameras and also the patrols and volunteer service issues, and Laura Russell may have some comments on the fencing and buffer issue.
So in terms of what was successful previously, we had a graffiti problem back in 2006, 2007, and graffiti was up high throughout the city. Back at Beckner Shelter, we installed a camera, and our incidents of graffiti declined. Now, again, they also declined elsewhere in the city, but we did find that to be an effective use of the camera.
Okay.
And any other questions related to?
Okay. No, I think that's fine. But, Laura, if you could address the fencing question.
In general, these strategies are considered to be best practices in planning and urban design. So we have had some positive experience with having plantings to reduce graffiti. There are some excellent examples now of taller fences that aren't as luminous, they're not as solid, but plants can grow up them, so those are commonly used in walkways. We could certainly get you examples of exact locations and photographs if you'd like to see those. There's also a well-known idea in urban design, and that's the transition of public space to private space. And so you usually want to go through that transition of being wholly in your private space and you know that you're in control in that area, and then you transition to a semi-public space. And so that's usually the area in somebody's front yard. And then a semi-public space is closer to the sidewalk, and then the public space is out in the sidewalk and out in the street. And so we know that as planners and urban designers integrate that concept into most street designs that we may design today. And usually the places that you feel most safe and comfortable, those are the places that have a good transition from public space to private space. So in this case, we can really see that there's not a good transition from public to private. And so that's why we do feel that, for example, a secondary fence, maybe of a different construction material or with vegetation, may help to provide that transition, even if it's a relatively close transition, given that constrained space. And we could still have a little bit more transition from private space in the backyard into the public space in the walkway.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, getting back to the question of the finding of having this area not used, basically. And we did hear from a lot of people that say that they do use it, but I'm wondering, as a percentage of the entire population of the city, at what point do we determine that it has an overall benefit to the entire city versus to a very small group of people that may benefit from its existence?
So that would be really a question of fact for the Planning Commission and for you to determine in the legal proceedings and public hearings that you'd have to hold regarding the vacation. And there would be evidence on both sides of that issue. I think there's evidence in front of you now on that issue, but it would be a decision that you'd have to make with little clear guidance. I will say, the little clear guidance from case law, I will say that given a situation where we've had some dozens, if not more, individuals say that they use the lane once a day, every day of the week, and so on, staff would find it difficult to recommend that the City Council make that finding.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Rico? Okay. We have no more questions of staff. We do have two speakers that have signed up. First, George Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is George Corey, 700 El Camino in Millbrae. Represent the 8 homes who are on the lane. Commend staff for going to a lot of work and doing some real research. The first time anybody's looked at ways to cure the problem that I know about, and this problem's been going on for more than 10 years. And at least 2 mayors had it called to their attention in their business, and I personally had Mr. Ruane come to my office. He offered to come, and I thank you, about 8 months ago, before we ever got this thing even to the council. We're gratified to have somebody pay attention to it. Now, on behalf of the people on the lane, they are still hopeful at some point you will see the wisdom in closing the lane, because they still see that as the only thing that makes sense. But what else you do when you go through this will be a process, I'm sure, that you work on some of these proposals. And I have to once again say that survey is meaningless in terms of the way it was put together for this purpose. And I wish staff wouldn't use that unless they got a survey that at least we feel was a proper one. and explain the problem or the potential reasons for closing it. Now, that aside, you have a lane 10 feet wide. You have a lot of different designs on homes. If you put in a fence and you put in some landscaping, you've probably used up 2 feet on each side of that fence. Now you've got 6 feet of travel. You probably can't get 2 wheelchairs past each other. I mean, you're narrowing this to a very, very almost unpleasant situation. You put in planters on the side. If you put in a fence, you've now created a trap between the home or its fence and the new fence. It's a garbage collection. And that's something that nobody can get to clean up because of the proximity of the 2 fences. You would have a very difficult time getting uniformity because some homes, as you saw in the photos, have their windows on the first floor. Yes, it would be nice if they could raise them as high as they want a fence, or you could put your fence, the city fence, as high as you want, but who in their homes wants to look out and see a fence 3 feet away from their house? There are so many different variations that I think the difficulty in building a uniform kind of a buffer are difficult. Let me address one other thing, because I think Mr. Wayne is looking at me like I'm getting late here. Is that so? It is. Okay. One other thing, Jim. Look, in the city plan, in the city proposal here, they say, look, you go down to Memory Lane. If we can't go through where the car dealership is, and that's something for the car dealership who will speak for themselves here tonight, we turn right, and we go to the end of the car dealership, and we put Memory Lane there, and then we go down to El Camino. Doesn't common sense tell somebody that's a relative absurdity in light of this whole package that we're talking about on people's safety and comfort in their homes? Because if they come down the end of Memory Lane and they turn right and they get onto the end of Honda, they're 50 or 60 feet from Crystal Springs Road. To me, there's something about that that says, are you kidding me, sort of. Suppose you had to turn to the north and go toward the hotel, and you put Memory Lane there out to the street. Aren't you doing the same thing when they're going to Genovan? The people who talked here about having a place to walk or exercise surely can't be saying, we can't walk another 65 feet in one direction and end up in this virtually the same place. So when you're going through this, please keep in mind the potential, at least, of closing that lane. Because I will say this to you. If you got a survey that you wanted to close that lane, and you can get one, I assure you, and all you had to do was to bring 5 feet, the fence from each home where it meets in the middle. You could retain an easement over it for the city forever. When people come down, there's simply a fence there like there are on homes all across the street. And then you've solved that problem for a lot of people in your neighborhood who shouldn't have to live under those circumstances. So once again, thanks to staff for really looking at this thing. No one's ever looked at it before this way. We do like the idea of the cameras. Those are always good. Maybe they can be used somewhere else where they'll be able to be a better economic value, and closing this street will make sense to you at some point in time. Thank you.
Jennifer Rice.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members.
Right into the microphone, Jennifer.
Good evening.
Tell us who
better?
you are.
My name is Jennifer Rice, and I'm an attorney. I represent Grace Honda. And one of the things I'd like to do this evening is address Grace Honda's need for expansion. We did receive the letter, and unfortunately, there is very little in the way of documentation at this point, but there is some, and I can walk the council and staff members through. Grace Honda is a franchise, and its franchise agreement has specific requirements for size, layout, and appearance. In the case of Honda, this is called the Honda Image Program. The most recent iteration of the Honda Image Program came out in July of 2011, and I think it's proprietary information, but I do have a copy that I would be glad to pass around, but not reproduce, if anybody would like to take a look at it. The first problem with Grace Honda is its building size. The minimum requirement for dealerships, for Honda dealerships, is 27,000 square feet. Grace Honda's current building is 19,000 square feet, and that's on 2 floors. The image requirement requires the 27,000 square feet to be on 1 floor. And when you think about the nature of an auto dealership, that makes sense. You have a service department, you have a showroom. These things generally happen on 1 floor. It's possible that Grace Honda can comply in part with the image program by putting some facilities on the 2nd floor, for example, staff lounges, things like that. But it's reasonable to anticipate that Grace Honda, in order to comply with this program, is going to have to expand its building footprint from between 8,000 to 14,000 square feet more. There is an additional a requirement for an additional facility to be added to the dealership that doesn't already exist, and that's an express service department where it looks kind of like an oil change place. People can drive in, have simple service performed there while they wait in a lounge, and then drive out again. If Grace Honda is allowed to undertake the remodel to comply with the image program, rough calculations indicate that the footprint will extend beyond the current location of Memory Lane. So the staff in the staff report recommended, if that were in fact the case, that Memory Lane be relocated to the southern side of the Grace Honda lot. But of course, that side of the lot, the Grace Honda building abuts the Walgreens building. And it's not anticipated that the current building be demolished. What we're talking about is an expansion. So there is no room on the southern perimeter of the lot to put a pedestrian walkway through. Moreover, because of the size of the expansion and because of the additional needs of traffic circulation and ingress and egress points, there really wouldn't be sufficient room left on the lot for a relocated pedestrian walkway. It just wouldn't make sense. In addition, if you remember, there is the pipe, and I'm assuming that the city would want to maintain some kind of access there, or points of access. So our thinking is that, well, Grace Honda's lot is already only half the size of the minimum required lot size for Honda. And Grace Honda gets around that problem by leasing other space on El Camino. But space is at a premium on the dealership if the dealership is going to remain there. If Grace Honda can't comply with the image program at its current site, then it will have no alternative but to relocate. Grace Honda has a second concern with regards to Memory Lane, which in a way is every bit as important. And it should be noted that it's really rare for pedestrians other than students, high school or middle school students, I guess, to cross the Grace Honda property. Grace Honda has been watching And it rarely is the part of memory lane that crosses Grace Honda used by anybody other than students. As you know, Grace Honda's business involves delivery of vehicles, but also customers driving onto the property to drop off their cars for service, to pick up their cars for service, coming in to buy parts. Those customers are generally not familiar with the layout of Grace Honda's lot. And when they come in, they're looking for the entrance, they're looking for the service department, the parts department, they're looking for parking spaces. And the one thing that they're probably not looking for is large numbers of high school students at the end of the day on an auto dealer's lot. This is a constant worry and a constant problem for Grace Honda. Grace Honda has to allocate staff members outside for the specific purpose of ensuring the safety of the students crossing the lot. And that's a burden that they shouldn't have to bear. It's an inherently unsafe situation. And I hear reference to the Safe Routes to School grant. And I think that it's ironic that people are talking about a safe route to school when the children are walking across a busy auto dealership to get to school. It's probably only a matter of time before someone is injured there, and it's fortunate that it hasn't happened already.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up here, Jennifer, pretty quick.
All right. There's also the damage that occurs to Great Honda's own property. Last year, there were over $15,000 worth of damage done to vehicles on the lot, being scratched. Not all of it, I'm sure, was done by the students, but some of it was. Backpacks, they squeeze in between the cars. The backpacks scratch the cars. And I would like to echo what Mr. Corey said, that memory lane across the Grace Honda lot is only a shortcut if you actually leave memory lane and walk diagonally across the Grace Honda lot. Because memory lane there parallels Crystal Springs Road and Genevieve. So the choice is either to walk up Linden and then down to get to the bus stop, for example, walk up Linden, down Crystal Springs, or to walk across memory lane and up El Camino. Either way, you're walking in a rectangle, and it's the same difference. It's not a shortcut.
Okay.
So, well, thank you. Sorry
Thank you
for
very
taking
much.
us.
Now, the reason I let you go a little longer is because this is some of the information we've been asking for quite a while regarding American Honda and the square footages and those types of things. So I think that's helpful for us. The question I have for staff is, so memory lane goes right through the middle of Honda. Is there a piping there, an easement? What's there?
I believe there is an easement under there. I'd have to ask Clara to confirm that, but I think that's one of the sections that there's an easement under.
It says there's a 12-inch water line between the home and El Camino.
Okay. Just for the benefit of the public, why don't you fill us in on what's there?
Based on my best memory, is a water main line under that property. If certainly no construction can be built over the water main line, that means if any construction would be needed to be extended over that water line, the water line would need to be relocated to another location.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Discussion? What would you like to see? What would you like to do? Michael.
Well, out of everything I heard proposed, in my opinion, the cameras would probably be the best solution. But it also seems that the funding is very iffy. And what I was really hoping that we could do is come up with a real solution that could be implemented fairly short order. And actually, any of these solutions, if they're dependent on a grant, I mean, we haven't even applied for the grant. We don't know how much money we could get from the grant. We have a very limited idea of what could be implemented in terms of what these fences would look like, how they would integrate with each of the homes on the lane. And so I don't know. I guess I'm not that impressed with what the options are right now.
If the funding were there, What would you like to see?
Definitely the cameras, I think, because beautifying, I mean, honestly, it's an alley, and I've made every effort to walk up and down it through different parts of the days. I haven't seen that many people using it. To spend a lot of money on beautifying something that's really an alley and not, I know a lot of people said they walk through it, and I'm sure they do, but the impact wouldn't be that great. And to make that level of investment, especially in this economy, just to make the alley look nicer. And I don't necessarily agree that it would be that much of a benefit. I don't see it being that great of a buffer. And I know it's better than nothing, but having people in large volumes that close to a residence, I think is pretty unique in our city. We have fairly generous front yards everywhere else. We don't have people right next to our yards in most places. So it's fairly unique that way, and so I think we should look at it in that light as well.
All right.
So, I mean, if anything, I'd like to see the cameras. That seems to be like it would be, if we have shown success with cameras in other areas, and we think that that's something that would mitigate what we're seeing, I think that would be a solution. In terms of abandonment, it looks like that would be very hard to do, unfortunately, because I think if we were able to just say, let's get rid of it and let the homeowners put fences up as they see fit, that would have been a nice, easy solution. But if that's not an option to us, I think I'd still like to see some cost estimate on putting up some sort of fence, maintaining the alley as a city property, but closing it off. And then we could make at least a financial comparison for what those gates would cost versus cameras or other options that are being proposed.
Thank you. Rico? You're not ready? Vice Mayor?
Mine brief. I'm not convinced in any of the options to keep it open. I'm not convinced with the arguments that state that you're giving in to the element, to the bad element, and that closing it just sends the wrong message. I have put myself in the position of 11 homeowners or X amount of homeowners, and I would be appalled at what was going on, and my efforts would be to close it. Short of closing it, I agree with my colleague that the first thing we should do is to put cameras up. You know, if this is what we need to do to prove that or deter any issues, any problems going on, you know, in those 2 blocks, that's fine. But no, I'm not. I don't agree that that any form of beautification or any form of buffering is going to alleviate the problem.
Rico?
I would agree with Mr. Corey as far as it was good to see this report come back with various options and thoughts on what we could do to help improve the site, if we can. I think some of the things that we're all concurring to is the camera, as Mr. Corey said as well. That is something that's been proven, as the chief said, at Beckner Shelter. I don't know how those get operated as far as the power or how that is facilitated. Light sensors may also be something that could help curtail something at night. I would think the barriers at each of the entrances that we talked about, so if there's any vehicle type access that may occur on occasion, that's stopped. I know somebody even told me, aside from stepping up our police officer that facilitates with the schools, is that we also have parking enforcement with the Cushman. That, you know, when they're making their loop around certain areas of town or doing their parking enforcement, that maybe they can go by there, take a look down, and just extra sets of eyes at all times would help enforce. I think those are some of the options that I've heard tonight that might be an initial step in trying to curtail some of the challenges that the neighbors and the residents are facing. As I said 2 weeks ago, I think we owe it to at least exercise and try these options before the ultimate other suggestion, which is closure of Memory Lane, which obviously has some more legal parameters. The other question, we're talking about grants, as Councilmember Salazar said, and I'm also one of those that, you know, it sounds great, and I didn't quite get how much could be applied or how much we get, but again, it's not been applied for. My concern is that, as has been brought up, this is something that's been going on since October. This is something that's been going on in the past, and so I'd like to see these get addressed quickly and not wait for a grant if that's at all an option. I think the residents have been patient and waiting, and I think that they deserve some type of action as soon as possible.
Thank you. I was on the subcommittee, still am, actually, with Michael Salazar, and we have had the privilege of sitting down with the homeowners directly and hearing, first of all, their grief, and I was pretty moved, actually. They went through a lot. Then we did a survey and actually found out, whether Mr. Corey agrees or not, that there were a lot of people, and I got a lot of emails over the last number of months, people saying, hey, there must be something else you can do. I use that all the time. We tried to work with Parkside before. I made a suggestion myself about maybe the students adopting memory lane, working that way. That was pretty much shot down. But it sounds like the atmosphere there is changing a little bit. That's a good thing. What I would like to see as a start, and this is just a start, is I think we need ADA accessible crosswalks where they don't exist. There's some do already. I think you need some bollards to prevent any type of motorized vehicle from going in and out of there, whether it be staggered fencing going in or whether bollards would do it. And I think you need the cameras. They've proved successful in other parts of our city, and I'd really like to see what those three things are going to hopefully accomplish. You're coming into April. We only have another 2 months of school. But I'm really encouraged to see that the police department is working closely with Parkside, and apparently most of the damage that's been done over the last number of years are from the students. And it's a very unfortunate thing, but I don't think just closing memory lane is going to solve the situation. I said to Angela Diego, who was here at one of the meetings, principal of Parkside, that there's a systemic problem, and kids have to take responsibility, parents have to take responsibility for their children's actions. And I don't think she has to be a police officer, but I am very encouraged that she's going to work with our officers to help to curtail the problem. You know, whether that be fines, whether it be, you find out that you get into people's pocketbooks and they start thinking twice about what they do and the ramifications of their actions. So I'm encouraged. As far as Honda, I would, there's a water line going down the middle. We heard tonight they need 27,000 square feet on one footprint. I would want to know what, and we could probably develop this pretty quick, what it costs to relocate a water line like that. I mean, is it really possible? Just to say we got to relocate the line and it's going to be $150,000, or is it $15,000? I have no idea. So I'd really like to find out what that cost is, so we have some options there. And if American Honda really wants to work with the city to participate, I think we can work together on some of those items. If it is in fact a very relatively short walk to Crystal Springs Road or over to Genevan, maybe we look at that and a Honda standalone. Doesn't seem to be the big issue. I think the issue is with the residents. Honda's there during the day most of the time, sometimes in the evenings, but the people actually live on that lane 24 hours a day. And I think that's a real important issue here, and I'd like to start with some of those items I talked about. And it's easy for me to say, but maybe the city can find the money. I just throw that at the manager. But I have no idea what all of these items cost, and maybe we can get a breakout of what we might be able to do with grant money or, you know, something else. So those are my suggestions. City Manager?
So we've heard 4 different opinions, and it sounds like some consensus around the idea of further interest in the installation of cameras. I heard the next most prevalent comment had to do with the installation of barriers or bollards to prevent unauthorized vehicular access, motor scooters and that type of thing, into the lane. So at this point, I would suggest, if it is the council's interest, that you consider directing us to proceed with one or both of those strategies and to bring back a more precise timeline, schedule, and cost. I don't have any magic to offer you in the way of cost. We believe that the Safe Routes to School grant opportunity is one viable option, but obviously, as you've heard and commented on, that will take time. So the next best potential option would be to use one-time resources that the city has in its bank account. That would need to be a decision of the city council itself. So we would be able to return to the city council on those two or any other additional options that the council would wish us to explore further as to more precise cost and schedule at your pleasure.
Right. I would also like the information on the Honda lot as far as the water line and what
the relocation,
what,
the cost
the
for relocation of the line.
Right.
And I heard Councilmember Salazar requested an estimate of the cost to close off the, I guess it would be the four ends of the two pieces of the lane in the residential area.
Correct.
Okay.
Through the chair, if I could ask
Yes, Michael.
one other detail on the bollards. If we were to put those in there, would there still be sufficient width on either side for a wheelchair to get through?
That would be required, and so we would have to look at that more carefully to evaluate how precisely to do that. But we cannot restrict access by handicapped individuals on a public way.
Okay. But through the chair, if we're looking at potential of cameras, which seems to be the consensus, then well, obviously we have to have electricity. So can we not, in the same vein, just look at potential lighting or sensor lighting, because you're going to have to get electricity for the cameras at some point, unless they're operated differently.
You're talking about motion-activated sensors?
You're correct.
Yes, we can take a look at that if it's the council's pleasure.
We can look at that. My only concern with that is in the evening. I wouldn't want to disturb the residents anymore if a cat or a dog walks up and down the alley and it fires off a bunch of lights in somebody's living room or bedroom or something. So, but it wouldn't hurt to look at the cost of those.
And if a resident does so deem and wants it, then maybe that's something we can consider. But at least we'll have the information, because I think the important thing is moving the ball forward and getting the information so we have it at our disposal and make decisions quickly.
Can I get clarification? I wasn't really clear when the city manager was finishing up her comments on satisfying a request from Councilmember Salazar. What were you saying as far as a cost of closing off for the openings? Is that what you mentioned?
My understanding of Councilmember Salazar's comment was that he had an interest to get a more precise understanding of what it would cost to put in, essentially to put a barrier at each of the four ends of the residential segments of the lane in order to prevent access. In other words, what would it cost and how would fence be installed in order to close the lane? Am I correctly understanding?
That is correct. So what it would cost to close it, basically, in the residential section.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And that would, I mean, that's what I've been asking for, is to have a scenario of what would take. I mean, I know we've gotten that far. We've gotten a lot further as far as, what the details, what the conditions are getting in vacating, vacating the lane. But so there's just, so now there's just going to be a cost on closing the openings versus the procedure in actually getting it vacated.
Correct. Our staff report this evening identified the procedural issues that would need to be addressed by the City Council and by the Planning Commission in considering an action to either vacate or abandon the lane. As I understood it, however, the question was, what would it cost to physically accomplish that once the procedural hoops had been jumped through? I think that was the question.
Well, I'm assuming then we also have the option of maintaining that as city property, but also closing it, meaning that we don't have to vacate it it can remain city property but be closed to public access.
Yes, but as I understand it, abandoning the use as a public lane or public access area would require the procedures associated with abandonment.
It would be the same procedure.
Abandonment procedures, yes.
Okay.
The streets and roadway law.
Okay. We have a consensus? Everybody agrees? All right. You have your direction?
Yes, if it's as I outlined it a moment ago. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. And thank everyone for talking on this. Appreciate it. Item number 10B, receive a report regarding settlement agreement between the City of San Bruno and PG&E, and adopt a resolution amending the city's investment policy relating to settlement of funds.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, I'm going to tag team with our city treasurer tonight on this report, so I will start.
Please.
If it's the council's pleasure. And I want to give the city council and members of the public a little bit of an overview of the settlement agreement itself and some of the significant elements related in particular to the settlement funds that will be received, that are expected to be received from PG&E as a result of our recent settlement agreement. Before I go into more specific comments about that, I wanted to just give a very short update and background on some of the financial issues as well as activity related to the community's rebuild of the damaged neighborhood. And I do that deliberately because, as you know, over the past year and a half, the city has been focused directly and sometimes it feels like almost exclusively on the rebuild of the Crestmore Glenview neighborhood that was so tragically and dramatically damaged by the explosion and fire. We are very pleased to be able to report that within the last 2 weeks, first couple of families have actually moved back into new homes where their previous homes were destroyed. So people are beginning finally to move back into their neighborhood. Of the 38 homes that were destroyed, today about a third have pulled building permits and are working on their homes. About a third are preparing to rebuild, are at some stage of the planning and design development process. And there are still a third of the families who were displaced from the neighborhood by destruction of their homes that we have not heard any solid plans from. Some of those have sold their properties to PG&E, and others may be planning to do so. The city, for its part, has begun rebuilding the public infrastructure. We will be replacing water and sewer lines, repaving the streets, among other infrastructure, throughout the neighborhood, and we will be rebuilding the park, again, among a variety of different projects to restore and improve the neighborhood. Funding for all of this work and for all of the other activities that the city has undertaken in response and to support the rebuilding and the recovery of the neighborhood, as well as the city's ongoing involvement in investigations, regulatory, and legislative proceedings, comes from a trust fund that was established by PG&E approximately a year ago. That trust fund is only available to cover the city's actual costs associated with the activities that I just mentioned and others, including staff time, to address the direct effects and activities associated with, arising from, and related to the incident of September 2010. It was the city's intent in entering into negotiations with PG&E to recognize and to address the damage that has actually been experienced by the San Bruno community as a whole. That damage extends far beyond the city's actual cost, as I just mentioned, those costs, again, being covered by the trust fund that was previously established. The damage that the settlement agreement intends to address includes things such as our residents' fear, their loss of the feeling of safety and security in their own homes and neighborhoods, again, throughout our community. And the change that we've experienced over the past 18 months of this community's identity as it's portrayed in the media and on a broad-based basis, that identity and reputation now being associated with a place where bad things happen. Clearly, that's not something that we believe is the rightful place of the San Bruno community in its identity and in its reputation, and it is a component of the damage that has been experienced by the San Bruno community as a whole. The settlement agreement specifies the receipt of $70 million in settlement funds and the specific dedication of those funds for the benefit of the San Bruno community. Those funds that were negotiated in the settlement include the $1.25 million value of 5 vacant properties in the Crestmore neighborhood that have been to date acquired by PG&E, and therefore the actual amount of settlement funds in dollars that will be paid by PG&E is actually $68,750,000. The city, as part of the settlement agreement, is required to establish a not-for-profit public benefit entity to invest, to manage, and to determine the use of the settlement funds. This, in my view, is one of the most important parts of this settlement agreement and the presentation tonight. The negotiations specifically addressed that the settlement funds will not go into the city's general fund. That was an important piece of the discussions and is a deliberate intent of the settlement agreement. The establishment of the not-for-profit entity is clearly then a critical component of the preparation necessary to meet the intent and the requirements of the settlement agreement. The city plans to move forward soon to begin the work effort to establish that nonprofit entity. And it's our intent to make sure that this is done in a thorough and thoughtful manner so that we make sure that we are covering all of the necessary issues that will, we hope, secure the long-term viability and operations of the entity for the benefit of the entire San Bruno community. In order to make sure that we do this right and that we cover all of the necessary issues, our work to date, on a very preliminary basis, indicates that this process will take as much, or estimated to take, approximately 9 to 12 months. Again, this is a very detailed and thoughtful evaluation, and there are many alternatives that will need to be, many issues and many alternatives that will need to be vetted in order to assure that we get it right and that we have the proper structure to move forward with this very significant responsibility. It's for this estimated period of time that the city will have temporary custody of the settlement funds. The city treasurer in a moment will address the city's process to hold the funds for this temporary period. And again, my comments are intended to supplement his and to emphasize that there is a necessary and detailed process required to set up the not-for-profit entity that will then be responsible for the consideration of ideas and the decision-making about the future use of the funds. This will take time, and no decisions about the funds will be made before this work to establish the not-for-profit entity and to give it an opportunity to determine, to get up and running and to determine how it's going to operate. No decisions will be made before this work is completed and the not-for-profit is up and running. Again, the intent is for the benefit of the entire San Bruno community, and there will be an opportunity for the public and other interested parties to contribute their ideas. But again, I'd like to caution that this is still a ways off in time, and that it will be the city's responsibility as a temporary custodian of the funds and of this process to make sure that it is done in a thorough and thoughtful manner. City Treasurer is here tonight to address the related action item that we're proposing tonight, and that is the very small amendment to our investment policy that allows him to take custody of the funds and to deal with their safety and security for the temporary period of time that they remain in the city's hands.
John?
Thank you. Honorable Mayor and City Council, the city's investment policy has been amended to establish a separate policy for handling of the aforementioned funds. Since the special purpose entity has yet to be created, the investment policy for these funds shall be to invest in securities for which the full faith and credit of the U.S. government is pledged for repayment of principal and interest. This will ensure that the total amount of the settlement will be secured until the establishment of the nonprofit. Included in the packet, of course, is the city's investment policy. The shaded areas on page 1 and 6 represent the modifications. I can just read them briefly. The monies entrusted to the city treasurer constitute the investment pool or the portfolio referred to in this document. However, the monies to be received by the city in connection with the settlement agreement with PG&E shall not be part of this investment pool or portfolio, and instead shall be invested separately as set forth herein. If you can move to page 6, under the heading of investments and strategies. With respect to those monies received by the city pursuant to the settlement agreement with PG&E, 100% shall be invested in the instruments described in the subsection A, which specifically is securities backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. Until such time the nonprofit is established, the city will act as temporary custodian. Again, once it's established, these assets will be transferred to the nonprofit.
Good. Any questions of our treasurer? Action?
Just a question for the city manager. When you say 9 to 12 months, is that 9 to 12 months to form the nonprofit entity, or 9 to 12 months to determine, to include forming the nonprofit entity and also to determine what to do with the funds?
At the current time, my best estimate, based on the little that I've been able to understand so far, is that we can use an estimate of 9 to 12 months for the establishment of the not-for-profit entity. Once the entity is established and up and running, then it can take on at its pace and with its procedures in place to determine the use and future of the funds. So it would be after the establishment of the not-for-profit entity.
Now, is it 9 to 12 months of work to do something like that, or is there just some waiting time, application time, and that's an excellent question. It's both. So there is a significant component of the work that will occur at the front end of that to determine how should it be structured, what is the governance structure, what is the operational structure. A number of different issues will need to be vetted as it relates to this particular entity and for this particular purpose. The law for establishing a not-for-profit entity is relatively straightforward, and probably there would be lots of people that will say, oh my goodness, you could do that much sooner. And if this were a straightforward process, if we had a roadmap and we understood exactly the details of how this particular entity should be structured, it would probably take, based on the advice I've received so far, approximately 6 months. And that then would include the various legal document development and filings and waiting periods and that type of thing.
Thank you. Any other questions or action?
Again, your action tonight is strictly on the investment policy as the treasurer's outlined.
It's pretty straightforward that the city treasurer gave us. So I'll go ahead and introduce the resolution for adoption, please.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item number,
Can I make a comment? And I want to thank the city manager for going again through this detail of distinguishing between a trust fund and the settlement of the 70 million. However, I'm sure there's still going to be plenty of questions as to, and we've heard some of the questions from the victims, from the residents in that area as to, what the money should go to. And I just think that there should still be some information going out in layman's terms to assure them that there is, in our opinion or in our belief, enough money in the trust to take care of the neighborhood. And,
That's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah. I know there's still, after that, there's still going to be questions as to, well, the residents of Crestmore Glenview neighborhood are part of the community as a whole and have been affected even more so than many members of the community as a whole. And so, how are we going to address them as far as the settlement? So I know that's going to be a difficult, that's going to be a challenge as we move forward. But I think there's still it's my inclination that there's still a confusion between the trust, the 50 million, and the 70 million.
So let me make just a couple more comments to hopefully clarify that situation. First, the trust fund was slightly modified through the settlement negotiations and the agreement that resulted as follows. The ultimate maximum amount that will be contemplated for contribution by PG&E to that trust was originally $70 million, coincidentally. And that amount was reduced to $50 million as part of the settlement agreement. To date, $12 million of that $50 million maximum have been deposited into the trust account, which is administered by an independent third-party trustee, and those funds are being used to reimburse the city for its costs associated with a wide variety of activities that include the direct services to the Crestmore neighborhood residents who were damaged, services provided by the city, that is, and it will be used as we move forward into the active rebuilding of the infrastructure. There are many different types of activities, and among the things that are included for reimbursement are things like staff time associated with the many different activities that we've undertaken in response and in the recovery effort to the devastating events of September 9th. Now, all of that said, none of those funds are directly intended to be distributed, shall we say, to residents of the Glenview neighborhood, and they are not the Crestmore neighborhood, and they are not intended in any way to provide restitution to those individuals who many of whom lost so much. That restitution or damages is the subject of separate legal proceedings that the city is not involved with and has no part in, and has actually very little information about. And that is the legal proceedings, the claims and lawsuits that have been filed by actually a fairly large number of individuals and families and against PG&E, and that is being handled, as I said, through the legal process. The city has no involvement, and the $50 million in the trust fund is intended for the purpose of allowing the city to do its work associated with restoration of the neighborhood. And I'd like to mention one more thing, because when you asked the question, you made me think about something I forgot to say earlier. There's been a little bit of confusion as well, certainly on that topic, and I hope I've clarified it. There's been a little bit of confusion in the wake of the settlement agreement completion on another topic that I think is important, and that is that I've received a couple of questions about, well, did the city waive or somehow release its interest or its right, if you will, to participate in advocacy for safety improvements, to participate in CPUC proceedings or other legislative proceedings relevant to the incident and to its aftermath, and more particularly to improvement of this areas, this state and this nation's utility infrastructure for the benefit and the safety of residents just like ours, everywhere, including ours. And the answer to that question is no, absolutely not. I don't believe that it would have been the interest or the direction of the City Council to make such a decision, and it certainly is not part of the settlement agreement. So the city is continuing to participate in CPUC proceedings, to maintain an active interest and awareness of activities associated with improvement of the safety related to utility infrastructure, and we will continue to do so. No rights have been waived as a result of this settlement agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10C, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with KJ Woods Construction in the amount of $88,000, approving a budget of $130,000 for the construction of the Canes to Angus Bypass Sewer and appropriating $130,000 from the Wastewater Enterprise Fund.
Honorable Mayor, Council members, Acting City Engineer Ray Ravazi will make the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Ray Razavi, the Acting City Engineer. This item that you have before you is a construction contract for Canes to Angus Bypass Sewer Project. I'm going to go over some information on the proposed project, why is it important to do this project, and some of the background and history, and finally the timing for the project. As you see before you on the overhead projector.
You have to speak right into that microphone there. Thank you.
What you see before you is an area of downtown at Huntington Avenue and San Mateo Avenue, bound by Angus, as well as Canes Avenue. This is a project that will replace 150 linear feet of a sanitary sewer line. This is a new sewer line that will connect the existing Canes Avenue sewer line to the sewer line that designated as number 1 that has been recently constructed by Caltrain's Grade Separation Project. This is an overall a larger project, and it consists of 3 parts. As I said, the first part was recently constructed by Caltrain as a grade separation project. That's about 1,000 linear feet on the right side in blue, designated as item number 1. Item number 2 is what we propose that would connect the existing Canes Avenue sewer to this line that we just completed by Caltrain. And item number 3 is the future project that we're going to incorporate the following fiscal year. As far as why we think that this is important, we have a lot of sanitary sewer overflows in this area. The sewer line does not have enough capacity to run the sewer, especially during the storm events. And we have multiple sanitary sewer overflows in this area. That's why we propose that this project be implemented, but we have to wait for Caltrain. This is an old project. Caltrain was supposed to come in with the grade separation project as they have, and they completed this segment last month. So at this point, we're ready to go with project number 2, connect the Canes Avenue sewer to the Caltrain sewer line that was put in, and eventually complete segment 3, which is replacement of Canes Avenue sewer and San Mateo Avenue sewer in order to benefit from this whole project. We went out and advertised the project per state contract code. We had 6 bidders bid on this project. The lowest responsible bidder was KJ Woods. at a cost of $88,000. Now, in this section, we have a lot of problems with other utilities coming in and crossing this proposed sewer line. So during the design, we went in and looked at different alternatives, how to consider the conflicts. We have a gas line, we have a high voltage electric line, we have multiple cable lines, and all will be crossing this new sewer line. So what we did during the design, we potholed, we went down below the existing utilities, but we still feel like we need to have an additional amount as a contingency, more than the usual 15%. So we bumped up the contingency to 25% in order to account for any problems we're going to have with utilities once we go ahead and dig the area, be able to hand dig and put the sewer line properly without affecting the existing utilities. So that is our current proposal. Also, during the design, we upgraded the 16-inch proposed in the CIP, as you see in your packet, to an 18-inch in order to accommodate future expansion and additional flow that could be run into the sewer line to Keynes Avenue. The total duration for this project is approximately 2 months, and we plan to award this project as soon as possible, get the contract executed, and complete the project during the summertime, during the dry season. Thank you.
Any questions of staff? Okay.
Two things. Is it customary to have a staff construction management inspection at that, you know, at, say almost 25% of the construction cost? Is it a percentage of the construction cost, or is it just normally a fixed cost because of, you know, the level of the project?
Okay, approximately we allow about 10% to 15% depending on the size of the project. Of course, if you have a $100,000 project as opposed to a $1 million project, the percentage changes. Higher the amount of the project, the lower is the percentage. But in normal project, we allow about 10% up to a 15% amount for construction management.
Because I mean, you're very articulate in alerting us to what exactly you anticipate running into, and I can appreciate that. So my next comment is, here's the $60,000 question. Is this going to almost guarantee that there will be no SSOs in that area? I mean, you make it very clear that this is a high risk in a very vulnerable area. So, I mean, are we solving the problem here?
Historically, at this location was always a capacity-related SSO, and with this improvement, certainly the capacity-related SSO will be eliminated.
Short of a guarantee, though, right?
The capacity-related SSOs will be eliminated. Doesn't mean that will not be possible a blockage or grease or any other cause or any other reason will not cause further SSO. But certainly those SSO, based on our best knowledge and design, will not be capacity related.
So I guess what I'm getting at, is there a measure of overkill? Is there a measure of that you can build into this design that would take care of the the absolute worst case scenario? Instead of designing towards engineering capacities, because I know because again we are it is a vulnerable area. It's flat. I mean, there's just so many issues that can happen in that area.
Based on our best knowledge and also based on modeling what was done by our consultant, this will meet the long-term capacity need of the city. Is a balance how big size you should go with any design for sewer. Is a balance between going too big size and then the pipe not having enough velocity for surf cleaning. And also, always is a trade-off and a careful assess balance between those two.
Okay. Thank you.
Through the chair.
There you go.
Kind of on what the Vice Mayor said, it's listed that this is the highest risk location for possible spills in the city. We're talking that is a lot. In the report, it says numerous. Can you help quantify for me or others what a lot, numerous, highest risk, opposed to another section or another area? I understand it has to do with grade separation and a project that was, I guess there's some history that could go back to 0405 when it was first discussed, or even further than that.
At this location last year was experienced ASSO. Also this year was experienced ASSO. And the only reason why wasn't any SSO during last week rain event and the rain event before that, our division installed emergency bypass 2 weeks ago and basically bypassed this location, and that's how they prevented another SSO at this location. And this is the highest number, is the last known capacity-related location which caused SSOs at this time in the city.
And I apologize, I didn't hear when you said, did you say A or 8?
This is the only capacity SSO location at this time in the city. No other known capacity-related deficiencies are in our sewer system right now, based on our best knowledge today. This is the last capacity improvements, based on our available knowledge today.
So we've had them in the, okay. He wants a guarantee too.
Everywhere else, the SSOs are not caused by the lack of capacity of the pipe itself, but they are caused by either debris, root intrusion, or grease. Those are, or structural failure.
So
Those
capacity-wise is what you're stating. This
Correct.
will correct, which is the highest problem that we have in the city currently,
Correct.
which could be different than what other SSOs are
That's
causing.
correct.
To say this brings
The
the
last.
most SSOs
Correct. This is the
is not totally correct. In the capacity aspect, yes. As far as in the city of San Bruno, where's the highest SSOs, period? Would this be considered that?
This happened to be both. This is the high SSO location and the last capacity-related SSO location. Us number of SSOs historically. I can go back for the last few years, but I know for that, how I said, last year was a SSO at this location. This year was
saying A. Are you saying A as singular, or I'm not hearing you correctly.
SSO last year.
Okay, I'm sorry. One.
One
Okay.
SSO this year, and 2 other SSOs were prevented
By the bypass.
already by the emergency bypass this year.
And then traffic-wise, what would be the plan as far as disruption to the area? Obviously, there would be, but how would we try to mitigate that? Obviously, it's tight.
There is a traffic control item in the budget, and we plan to have the traffic moving at all times, except at perhaps some evenings or some night works that we may have to close down just for safety, that we have a very, very deep trench. This sewer, because we have to bypass all the other utilities that are anywhere from 5 to 8 feet below ground, this sewer actually goes down below 10 to 12 feet. And in order to do that, we may have to close down part of the street, and we try to do it outside of the time that would impact the businesses. But there is a traffic control item in the bid, and the contractor will submit us for our approval a traffic control plan to keep the traffic moving in this area. This is very sensitive to the businesses. We understand that, and we want to make it sure that not only the businesses are not getting impacted, but also it is safe for people to be crossing this, either pedestrian, bicycle, or motor vehicles.
Go through the chair. Thank you. Just one quick question. I'm sure that this was factored in, but I'm wondering how much future growth can this improvement provide for the areas that are upstream of there? I mean, are we planning for pretty much any possible future growth in the area, or some of it?
in our design was included any possible growth based on our general plan and also transit corridor plan.
Okay, great, great. And getting back to some of what was discussed, my understanding was that if you have a good pipe that has good flow, there's pretty much, you're not going to run into a lot of problems because grease should be able to flush through. We shouldn't have a problem with root intrusion. So unless it's some very unusual debris, I would imagine that we were pretty much going to solve the issue at this part of the city. Would you agree?
Your assumption is correct.
Okay. It's pretty close to a guarantee. Thank you.
Close as you're going to get.
Yeah. Nothing else we can do, basically.
Just
put guarantee in the minutes.
And you can let the record show that Mrs. O'Connell showed up. All right, thank you. Done. Okay, any more discussion or action on this item?
I'll introduce the resolution for adoption.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item 10D is our final item. Adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for the purchase of pedestrian audible push-button stations from Western Pacific Signal, LLC, in the amount of $55,140.79.
You were just here.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is the second item that I'm covering tonight. This is the purchase of pedestrian audible signals. These are the push buttons that we are proposed to install along El Camino Real. We are looking at a map of El Camino Real. On the top left is 380 crossing El Camino. Sneed Lane is the first intersection that we're going to install all the way down south at 10 locations along El Camino Real all the way to San Felipe Avenue. Again, I'm going to talk about exactly what we are doing, why is it important, give you some history, and then finalize it with how long it's going to take. What we're proposing is, at this point, purchase these audible pedestrian push buttons. These are the push buttons that have been authorized and accepted by the Center for the Visually Impaired and has been coordinated with us in terms of what areas, what intersections along El Camino Real would be eligible and would be benefit from this technology. These are the push button that has a grail that if you're visually impaired or if you can't hear, you can get the sound, or you can actually touch the grail and find out exactly where you're going, the street name. The audible would tell you exactly what street you're crossing and what the adjacent street is. It will give you also the countdown as part of the second part of this project, which we're not purchasing yet, that would count down from, let's say, 25 or 2030 down to 0, so that you'll be able to get across this state route easily. As you know, we have at least 6 to 8 lanes that people have to cross, so especially crossing the El Camino side of it is very important to this project, to the pedestrians, and to people who actually live in San Bruno and need to have extra help in order to cross this state highway. So at this point, we're going to tell you about the staff research that has done that which one of these audible signals are actually most appropriate for these locations. This is a state highway, so all the facilities that you see in terms of signal belongs to Caltrans. So what we had to do, we had to go to Caltrans and ask them exactly what we can install that you would accept and give us a permit to be able to have in your right-of-way. So in coordination with them, they had recommended a special kind of this equipment that would be able to match their facility. The least impact to their cabinets, the least impact to the conduits, and the least impact to their maintenance. Because they certainly do not want to have a maintenance headache that every time someone pushes the button, something goes wrong with the intersection with the Caltrans cabinet. So in order to do that, we researched all the available units available, and this particular unit was the only one that met all the requirements of the specifications, And also, the installation was the least expensive, and Caltrans was willing to provide us with an accelerated permit process in order for us to install. So we obtained the bid through a sole bidding process. In other words, the municipal code allows us to go ahead if we have a sole vendor that specifies the exact article that we want, that we go ahead and obtain bids from them. And that's what we did. We obtained the bids, and this is what is before you right now. This is part of the El Caminos Reals original project that installed some medians back in 2009. This portion was taken out because we wanted to purchase it and install it. There's a grant requirement that we need to install this, and this is the first part of the pedestrian installation, which is the audible portion. Later on, we're going to come back to you with the countdown portion, which is going to be put out to bid, because there are many manufacturers that actually produce the countdowns. But the audible portion is now before you. And as soon as you approve this, we'll go ahead and submit the requirement to Caltrans for approval. And as soon as we get the encroachment permit, we can install it within the next few months.
Any questions?
Real quick, one quick question. We just on the last topic talked about contingencies. 10 to 15% is normal, 25 in the other project because of the underground. In here, I didn't see any contingency. Is that correct?
Actually, the balance for the project right now we have in the funds is approximately $90,000 that is left from the project original budget. This is to purchase $55,000. We don't need any contingency because we already included 10% additional equipment as part of this. In other words, we needed only 50 equipment pieces, but we added 5, so we have 55 pieces of equipment. We're going to install 50 of them, and the other 5 would be kept in storage. So in case one of them did not work out, we don't have to wait until we order another one to come in. So that 10% is actually included as part of this $55,000. So we are having 5 extra equipment purchased as part of this program.
Chair?
Michael.
I was going to ask about the ongoing maintenance of this, but it sounds like with the 5 extra units, we accounted for the parts, and I'm assuming city staff would be able to replace those.
Your mic's not on.
I'm sorry. I'm going to repeat that. So I was saying that the replacement parts that you mentioned account for at least part of the maintenance, and I'm assuming city staff would be able to undertake the replacement of those parts in-house without incurring any additional cost.
That is correct. It would be just the cost of installation.
Okay. And because we're installing these on Caltrans posts or lights or whatever they have out there, if they were to at some point replace those, modernize them, upgrade them, do something different, what would happen to these things? Would we be able to redeploy them then on a new infrastructure?
Absolutely. As long as we have a post that we could attach this to, and we would have access to the basic conduit. The nice thing about these units are we don't have to go into the Caltrans cabinets. Mm-hmm. This is the control cabinets that they have at every intersection. And Caltrans is very adamant about not wanting other people to be able to have access to it in case something goes wrong. They don't want to be responsible for it. So the nice thing about this particular Polar equipment is we don't need access to the cabinets. Okay. This is a standalone. It would just be mounted there with a push button, and between the two, they'd be able to function independently of the signal operation.
Okay. And I've seen where there's been a move to change from on street lights, moving from a serial to a parallel, or maybe it's the other way around, and going to LED. Would any of those changes in infrastructure impact what we're doing with this?
Councilmember, the street lights are independent of the signal system. You are correct. We do have serial street lights that we've been having problems with, because if one goes out, the rest of the street lights in the series goes out. And we are trying to turn that into a parallel system, and this has no impact to these Caltrans signals, and totally separate system.
Okay, thank you.
Any question?
So for the benefit of the public, so when these are installed, they want to cross, they'll hear the street that they're crossing, and then you'll hear tweeting as you cross?
Yes, it will tell you you are crossing at you are crossing El Camino Real at San Felipe Avenue,
Okay.
or you're crossing San Felipe Avenue at El Camino Real.
Okay, and then there'll be an audible,
signal as you, yes.
which we're accustomed to is a bird
for the
tweeting
hearing
or something.
impaired, that's correct.
And then eventually, you're saying that there'll be another component added on pole that will have the countdown?
Yes, we will have the countdowns eventually. The countdowns would only be for crossing El Camino Real because that is a long distance.
Right.
We will be saving money for the shorter crossing, just having for the visually and hearing impaired individuals for all intersections, all crossings at the intersections.
Okay.
But for El Camino Real, we will have the countdowns.
Thank you.
Any other questions or action?
I'll introduce adopt the resolution, please.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item number 11, we heard that already. 12, comments from council members. Seeing none, we are going into closed session, public employee performance evaluation pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, City Attorney. And prior to adjournment, I would like to adjourn this meeting in the memory of Mr. Art Lepore. Art was a Millbrae resident. He was a World War II vet, a retired Capuchino High School teacher, served 17 years on the Millbrae City Council, 12 years on the Millbrae School Board, and made many other contributions to the community before passing away on March 14th, 2012. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned until April 10th, right here at the Senior Center.